Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Bitch Up. I hope you guys picked up our call because we're here.
Welcome back, bitches. How are
It's
y'all
like,
doing this week?
we're surviving, I feel. I mean, I'm surviving, but
Yeah.
I'm thriving and it's okay.
Yeah, I think if my calculations are correct, this was my PMS week, and I definitely felt it. I definitely
Yeah,
felt it. I've been on the struggle bus this week, but I took a nap earlier today and I'm feeling good. I'm feeling better.
I know. Today, we both we fell victims to our long ass naps.
Yeah.
As soon as I logged off of work, I was like, and my mom's like,
Yeah.
"Are you okay? Are you alive? Did you work
No,
today?"
no, literally, whenever I take like an extended nap after work, I think my family thinks like I'm unwell, as in like she's falling sick.
Yeah.
She's getting sick, she is sick, or like something's wrong, right?
Yeah.
So like I got out of the shower earlier before I went to run an errand, and then my face was all red and like teary. My eyelashes were kind of falling out. My mom was like, "You have an eyelash on your cheek." And now I went to the kitchen because I needed to blow my nose. And my sister was like, "Are you getting sick?" And I was like, "No, I just like went hard on my face when I was washing it. So like now like it activated my sinuses
Um,
and I didn't get to fully
Yeah, you
blow
were like the
out."
lymphatic drainage.
Yeah. Yeah. So and then I'm pretty sure she also said that because I literally passed out for an extended period of time after work.
My brother came into my room one time. He usually works during the week and then he has weekends off, but that time he got a weekday off. And he came and knocked on my door and I was working on my laptop, right? I'm just like working and he's like, "Dude, you need to make noise." I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Cuz I hadn't heard you all day. Usually I'll hear like your meetings or something, and I was scared to walk into your room." I'm like, "Why? Did you think I was dead?" He's like, "Low key, I was scared at what I was going to find."
Oh
And I'm
my
like, "Oh my god, I'm
god.
so sorry." And he's like, "Yeah, so next time make some noise." I'm like, "I didn't even know you were here." So for all I know, I'm like,
You wake up and you, like, just ring a bell so you can hear it.
"I'm alive." Yeah, but I'm like, "That was very
And you do
dark."
it at every hour.
I was like, "Oh shit.
Checking
Speaking
in.
of death." Just kidding. I have
Who
a
died?
story. I'm like, "Me." And I was like, so, and this kind of goes into my bitch up moment. But so as I've said before in the previous episodes, that my goal was to run up to like 4 miles and like
Yes.
up it, right? So and run every day. This week, I've been meeting those goals and running every
Nice.
day the 4 miles.
Mhm.
However, the day it started on Monday, I don't
Mm.
know if you remember, but where I live, usually sometimes we'll drive, there's like a crossway. And then
Mhm.
one of the roads, you remember where we went to go take our pictures at the,
Yes.
the nature
Mhm.
center park? So I was heading that way, so I'm running, right? Usually, obviously, you always look both ways before you cross because there's always cars coming, and you never
Right.
know if they're going to respect the stop sign because some people don't. So I saw a car coming from my right side, and I was running and I crossed, but I slowed down just in case they weren't, just to see if
Gonna
they were
stop.
slowing down, right, and stop. I saw them slowing down, so then I sped up because I'm like, all right, let me get out of their way because I'm not trying to interfere. And the car kept going. It kept going. So this is me. So
Mhm.
and then this is the car. Like, that's how close it was. I could have literally hit it. I could have, what's
It
the
could have hit you. You could have thrown yourself on it and, like, there goes
pulled a
your
Maite in what is that novela where she, like, gets hit
cuidado
by the
con el
car?
ángel. It's
Cuidado con
called
el ángel, and she gets
yeah.
ran over. That could have been me. And I literally saw why she kept going because she was on her phone texting. So she looked to her right, but she just didn't look my way. So I was like, "What the fuck, dude?" And I really hope she saw me through her rear mirror because I'm like, the fact that if I hadn't been more like conscious of like the cars coming, like I could have easily been ran over, and that would have been the end of my career.
Yeah. Of
And
all
this is
careers.
yeah, and I was telling my dad, I'm like, "See, this is what happens when I'm trying to be healthy and, like, get my cardio in,
The
like,
world
if
the
this
universe
isn't a
just
sign that I shouldn't do it, I don't know what is. Because I have coyotes coming after me, I have owls
snakes.
coming after me, snakes, now I'm getting threatened to get ran over." So, yeah, so my bitch up moment is that even after that incident, I still kept running. Just kidding.
I'm sure you had a huge adrenaline rush from it.
N no, actually, I didn't, not because I was in a good
Oh,
I think I hit a good place when I'm running where I was just, like, not tired. Actually, that was a really good run. I didn't feel tired. I kept going, but I was more so shooketh that I was like, "Holy shit," like, I could have easily gotten ran over because this person wasn't paying attention, and I felt like I should have been more mad than I was, but I was just, like, more like, "What the fuck?" And then I kept going instead of, like, really
Endorphins make
make people happy. Yeah.
Yeah, your endorphins were too high for you to even be like, "Oh, like, yeah, almost
Yeah.
I could
And
have
I'm like,
almost
didn't I'm like,
died."
no one was around to see it, so I was really like, "What the fuck, dude?" Like, you could've I'm like, "Ugh, you're so
Did you
lucky
che
I was
did
aware."
you check their license plate? Because you could have,
No,
like,
I
put
didn't
it on
even
the community Facebook or something like that, "This asshole," or just be like, "Just beware, reckless driving, pedestrians, like, pedestrians
No.
beware, reckless driver, does not slow down when pedestrians are running," or something.
Yeah, but that was crazy. So that was my I was like and I was texting you. I think this is when I was texting Joey and Ixchel, and I was like, "Okay, guys, I'm gonna go on my run."
Oh,
And then
you
we were, like,
did?
doing the memeing, and then after that, I was like, "Okay, focus." And then literally within, like, 10 minutes of that happening, I almost got ran over, and I was gonna text you guys, I almost died. But then I was like, "Let me save this for the pod."
Oh my god.
So,
Well, I'm glad
yeah.
nothing happened to you, and also that it didn't, like, damper or, like, in any way influence your plans and goals for this week, that you still kinda kept at 'em. But if anything, just kinda be more cautious, right? But I feel
Yeah.
like it sucks that you have to be the more cautious one when it's like, it's the driver that should have been more cautious and
Yeah.
should have had
I'm
better
like,
judgment.
luckily they slow down, at least they somewhat slow down instead of going full speed. Because then I'm like, they probably would have either hit
Clipped
me
you.
or yeah, or
Yeah.
something. So I was like, "Damn." And
You're
then
actually, like, sitting
yesterday
on the other side of the road like, "Ah."
yeah, and then yesterday, I couldn't finish my 4-mile run because I started to feel my hamstring getting tender. It was starting to feel like I was going to get, like, a Charlie
Cramp?
horse or a cramp, like, that was
Oh.
how like, one wrong move and it was gonna cramp. So then I stopped and started walking, and then when I would test it to see if I could still run, it felt heavy and tense. So I was like, "Fuck, dude, I can't continue running. I should probably stop." But I'm like, "Let me finish my 4-mile walk. It's fine. Like, I'm a mile down, like, I could or
You still got your
yeah."
4 miles
But I
in.
was at a point where I was like, "Should I just turn around and go home?" Because it's starting to feel like I won't be able to finish this walk. Like, that's how crazy it was.
Oh,
And then
wow.
towards, like, the last 10 minutes of my walk, I was starting to feel it and was starting to, como si estaba manqueando? Is that how you say it?
Were you, what is it called when you're I forgot what it's called.
Yeah.
Limping?
Limping, yes. I was starting to
Yeah.
limp, and I was like, "Fuck, I probably should have just turned around and went home because I was
Mhm.
at a point where I could literally just walk instead of going all the way around. But yeah, so for now, I that's why I didn't go run today, guys, so, because I was
Well, I think
resting my little
I was
hamstring.
gonna say that. I was like, you needed to rest. I mean, I think it's good that you kinda threw yourself into the 4 miles runs, and you did most of the week, but, like, since that little hiccup happened, it was good for you to rest, because then you
Yes,
don't
I'm
wanna
telling you,
risk a more severe injury.
the signs are there that I
Yeah,
should
like,
not run, that I
maybe
should
we
not
should,
work out.
or maybe we should just have you doing a different type of workout, not one that trolls your hamstring.
No, yeah, it was crazy. I'm like, I almost got ran over on a Monday, and I almost pulled a muscle or tore a muscle on a Friday, so,
Oh, it sounds like
you know.
you've lived a whole life this week. Ups and
Yeah.
downs, trials and tribulations.
But you know what? She bitched up and she's here. She's taking care of her body. She's
That's
mentally
good.
trying to thrive, and that's all I would say. She went to the ballet. That was
Yes,
fun.
how was that? How
You
was
made
that?
it to the ballet, guys.
How was that? I've been dying to hear about, first of all, your experience, but also what shoes did you wear?
Okay, so I did wear the shoes that I wanted to wear that were ballet inspired. Well, the shoes that I wore are made of the actual ballet, of recycled ballet. I don't know how like flats or like the shoe that ballerinas wear.
Ballet shoe, yeah.
Yeah, the ballet shoe, and it's the material. I want to say it's made in London or
Mhm.
somewhere in England, and they get the recycled shoes from there, and then that's how they make the shoes. So I did end up wearing them. I tore up my feet because I ended up walking more than I anticipated walking.
Mhm.
So that was annoying, but I sat most of the time, so it wasn't too bad. And then just walked back to the car, and I was like, "It's fine." Mentally, I was like, "It doesn't hurt. You're fine. It's
You
just
were like
taller than I'm." accustomed
Yeah.
to. I'm like, "It's fine."
Wow.
I'm like,
How what
"Toe,
were
heel,
the
toe, heel,
inches?
toe, heel."
I know. No, it's heel toe. I was
Oh, my
about to
bad.
say
Heel,
your
toe,
whole
heel, toe.
this whole time no, I was about to say that, like, the whole time you're in your head, you're just like, heel toe, just
Yeah.
concentrated on getting to the car. How what was the height on your inch or what was the inch height on the heel?
I wanna say it's like 4 or 4 and
Oh,
up. It was tall
yeah.
because my they were like I usually like to do like a 3 below, like, that's my max
That's your sweet
capacity.
spot, yeah.
Yeah, so then I'm pretty sure it was like a 4 up, so they were tall, and they obviously I like my foot to have, ankle
Support,
support, but this one does, but it's, like, not really because it's just you tie
the
it and then
ribbon,
that's it.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like, "Ooh," but anyways, the ballet was great. My sister and my mom enjoyed it, but then my sister was like, "I feel that this made me realize that I'm actually a playgirl because at every single time I was expecting them to talk or sing or something, and
Yeah.
then it's like it's just ballet,
Music,
but
it's
they're
just music, yeah.
yeah, it's just dance and the music. So they're like she was like, I feel this made me realize that I'm more of a play person and I enjoy more of that aspect of like the singing here and
Theater,
there and
yeah,
more acting, yeah."
yeah.
And then she's like, "I didn't realize that they have to bow so many times." I'm like, "What do you mean? That's like theater 101, like, they have to like, it's a tradition for
Okay,
them
now
to."
you get it not you getting all elitist on Karina, like, what do you mean? Like, everybody knows it's theater 101,
Everybody
bitch.
knows. No,
Everybody knows theater etiquette, everybody knows ballet.
sorry about it. Just kidding.
No, it's funny because we literally talked about ballet a while
Yeah.
back and how it is an elitist type of, like, I don't wanna say sport, but, like, art, if you will, and how, like, it's not as
No, it is
accessible
a
to
sport.
people.
Like, oh my gosh, the
Yeah,
my mom was like, "They have beautiful legs." Like, every single
I
one
could
of these
imagine, yeah.
ballerinas and yeah, they have beautiful legs. The men have beautiful legs, lean and just, like, perfectly muscular and, like, gorgeous. The turns and the discipline that these dancers have, yeah, they deserve
Yeah.
all the applause. That and the Karina was like, "Yeah, like, 100% they deserve every single applause because the amount of dedication that your body has to go through too and
Yeah, and
the
it's
pain also
years.
that your body has to
Yeah.
go through to even accomplish a specific turn or anything, and the balance and, like, all the core, but yeah, other it was good. I enjoyed Sleeping Beauty. I learned a lot actually. So in the Sleeping Beauty ballet, I guess it's tradition because done they had the Princess and the Bluebird or something like that. They
Okay.
had Puss in Boots with the white cat, and then there was someone who else? Red Riding Hood were involved in the ballet at one point, and my mom was like, "Why were they there?" And I was
Like,
like,
part of
"I'm
the
pretty
lore?
sure that it was more so like we're watching ballet and then they're also having their own celebration by having like entertainment." So that's how I understood it. And then I looked it up and I was right. But also, apparently, the person who wrote Sleeping Beauty also had to do with those three fairy tale stories. So it's a way of like an ode to the writer of Sleeping Beauty. And I was like, ah, the
Huh,
more you know.
interesting.
So
Yeah.
if you guys see them show up in the ballet, if you guys ever go, I recommend it. Go to the ballet, go support your local theater and the I don't know, is it the the ballet companies that go and put on these
Yeah.
shows?
Yeah, they're
Yeah, go
companies.
support.
Yeah, that's cool. I was thinking about Karina's comment about, like, "Oh, I was expecting for them to or I was waiting for them to talk." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I forgot that it was Sleeping Beauty." So, like, we're used to seeing Sleeping Beauty, like, the movie and, like, the fantasy stories of it. So, like, I can see how she was like, "When's the audio coming in?" You know?
Yeah. No,
But
but
no,
it's great. I mean, the emotions and everything is kind of portrayed through the music. Maleficent
everything's
was
so high-end. Yeah.
yeah, was played by a guy and he was fabulous, darling. Like, yeah, it was really cool. But yeah, go to the ballet, guys. And,
Yeah.
so go support your local theaters, your local theater camps, anybody who's throwing on go support your kids too at their
Yeah.
plays, right?
Yeah. No, I love that because I think recently some stuff came across my desk for Torrance Theater and like their theater company is putting on some stuff in the summer. And I was like, oh, this is
Hmm.
cool. I was like, oh, I'm going to share them with Lucy to see if she wants to check out any of these things. Some of them were plays, and I think they also are doing ballet. And I thought it was cute because it's like a little bit more local and stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that the Long Beach one was doing Alice in Wonderland next. I
Yeah,
think that's the ballet that they're doing, so I was like, "Oh, that'd be cute, fun." I remember I
yeah.
think my first play was Fiddler on the Roof. I think another one I went to go see was Chicago at
Okay.
a local theater in Fullerton, I wanna say, and that was really fun because the protagonist was played by a man, and he did
What
awesome.
did you say Chicago? Is that the play?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's cool. I think, like,
Mhm,
the first play I went to see, like, where I recognized, like, "Oh, this is theater, this is, like, arts and stuff." I think in middle school, they threw a play. Our drama teacher was really cool, and she threw up a whole production, and I just
which
remember
one
because
was it?
I'm trying to remember, I just remember it was something related to pirates, and it wasn't, like, Pirates of the Caribbean, and it was cool
Peter
because she had source material, right, but she really
Mhm,
did kinda incorporate, like, her own flair to it, so, obviously, like, you had the anchor of the source material, but she added, like, a bunch of stuff to it, and it was so cool. I wasn't in the play, but I was in leaderships. I just remember being at the auditorium all day, so I saw all the plays,
mhm.
every period that they held them or every whatever, and I was just there ushering, like, classes and teachers and whoever was there to their seats and kinda just facilitating stuff and just kind of keeping watch and making sure that people were, like, where they're supposed to be and stuff, and then supporting them too if they needed, like, any, like, errands or something. And that was really cool to see, like, just the production that she put, and it was cool because then we got invited to the post-production party that they had
Mm,
afterwards, and it was so much fun, and I was just there like, I wasn't even in the play, but I was here, and I knew a lot of people that were in the play, so it was fun to see. So I would say that this is the first time that I saw, like, a play that I was just like, "These people are acting, like,
yeah.
this is the whole thing." I think the other one that was most memorable or that I could again, "Oh, we're acting," or, like, "This is, like, a thing," I think it was in high school, we went to watch, Don Quixote at
Mm,
it was a college, and I don't remember what college, but I think it was, like, a city college nearby, and they put a production of Man of La Mancha, así es como se llamaba
sí.
the the production or whatever, and yeah, that was a lot of fun to watch too, I really enjoyed that. And then, as I got older and stuff, I got to go to Broadway when I was in college, and that was fun. I was, like, literally front and center, like, I was, like, in the 1st or 2nd row because I went to see James Franco on Broadway, so naturally, I had to be where his sweat could, like, come off to me. But
Yeah.
anyway, I was there to dab his sweat. I'm just kidding. But yeah, that was fun. So, like, I get Karina's feedback of like, "Oh, I would love to see that." But I think ballet is so much fun too, just because like you said, there's so much beauty and there's a lot of emotions, like you said, and there's so much more heightened because you're not, speaking or singing or whatever, so
Yeah.
yeah.
And I will say, like, even if people, like, they're like, "Oh, I've already seen the movie, I don't need to see the ballet." Like, the ballet is so different.
It's different, yeah.
Yeah, like, the music was a little different, and I'm like I was obviously comparing it to Disney one because that's the one that I was
Well, and
obsessed
every
with as a kid.
production is also different.
Yeah. And I was, like, trying to pinpoint where they were, and I'm like, the storyline was a little different, and I was like, "Oh." So even if you, like, know the story of, like, Sleeping Beauty or you've seen the films, it's very different, so it's definitely a different perspective and how they like you say, how
Yeah.
they play it, how they, do everything, the
Produce
costumes
it.
also, and I was
Yeah.
just like I think
Well,
that's
that
part of the aesthetic for me. I'm like the costuming of the dancers, and I'm like, "Ooh, I wonder what
yes.
Sleeping Beauty's going to wear," you know?
And that's what leans into the beauty of it too, I
Mhm.
feel. And yeah, I mean, it certainly does vary, and that's where I think a lot of the creativity comes from when yeah, it's Sleeping Beauty, but it's a specific production, or even when you go see plays, right? Yeah, it's Chicago, but sometimes it's a variation of it, or like when I saw Matilda recently, that specific play is obviously had references and it kind of followed a similar storyline, but it also had a lot of nuance differences and even the
Mhm.
scripting is different. It's not like one for one or bar for
Yeah.
bar for the movie. But that's exciting. That's fun. And yeah, no, I echo your recommendation for people to get involved and go check out art stuff if they're into it. And even if they're not, like I mean, don't knock it till you try it. Just try it once. It might be fun to
Yeah,
see.
I mean, you never know what you'll be into, like, maybe you're an opera person, you know?
Well, what are we talking about today?
So I think
What's
this
on
week
our docket?
On our docket. So I know last week we kind of we were discussing the manosphere and then young men and, the red pilling of it all. And we kind of talked about your bitch up moments for last week. Our
Yes.
recommendation was going to church and or at least being a service to your community and whatnot. And we kind
Mhm.
of said that we should probably touch on that whole subject of like at least from what I've noticed that a lot of people are converting to Catholicism at a
Yeah.
higher rate, especially in present time, and I found that interesting. So I figured
Yeah.
we can discuss it and kinda figure out why. I think we kinda know why, but, you
Well, I
know
think yeah, no, it's definitely interesting and it's very telling of the times, right?
Yeah.
To see this sort of, dare I say, Catholic revival or Catholic resurgence. And I
Mhm,
remember you had actually mentioned this as a topic last season or towards the end of last season, and we sort of put a pin on it and we just never got to do the
mhm,
work for it. So it's funny, it's kind of a piggyback off of what we were discussing last week, but it just kind of made sense because I started to notice it more too, and I don't know if it's because, we're being, I was gonna say audited. We're being listened or, like, we're being, what is the thing? We're being recorded or
our
whatever.
algorithm is
Or what
listening
is
to
it
us.
called? Yeah, but what is it called when, like, you're being tracked or something? I don't know, but anyway, so it makes sense that it started coming up in my algorithm, and then so I thought, "Oh, this is actually a good idea, like, we should,"
Mhm,
and I kind of looked into it a little bit more, which of what I'm interested in our conversation today is because a lot of the research I did focused a lot on Gen Z folks, but there was
mhm.
also some people that referenced that it's also happening amongst the millennial generation. And so I'm curious to see if you saw anything of that.
Yeah, I think when I looked into this too, as far as the research go, I also found that a lot of the studies, highlighted Gen Z
Mhm.
youth,
Yeah.
specifically male youth, and then also, atheists, and I think Protestants were
Yeah.
also, like, one of the high, conversion rates or accounted for the high conversion rates into
Yeah.
Catholicism. And I thought that was interesting. You and I were both raised Catholic, so some of I think that
We're
the
cradle
term
Catholics.
yeah, the term cradle Catholics comes to mind. So when I
Yeah.
was looking into this, I was more so, like, I think I was more so trying to think of, like, the pros of Catholicism and, like, my
Right.
feelings of Catholicism and why someone would be drawn to it.
Right.
Um, I don't know if and I know I've said this before, but I don't know if I would say that I'm like a Catholic or I would associate to the Catholic religion because I don't necessarily agree with the Catholic Church as far as like
Mhm.
what it promotes or the institution um of it all, right? I don't necessarily believe that you need to submit to the authority of the Vatican, and I kind of
Yeah.
struggle with the idea that one person is like appointed the head of a religious
And
institution
that
and that
person being a man.
yeah, and that
It's
they
also
have a deeper spiritual connection to God compared to like other people, you know what I mean? So
right, the hierarchy of it. Yeah.
yeah, and I
Well,
also don't believe that you have to go to mass every Sunday to have a spiritual connection with God or that it's a mortal sin if you miss mass, like, that doesn't make sense to me, but
I'm
and
sorry,
I would
I am
say
the church. I
and I
am
would
the church. Like,
and I was gonna say
me and baby Jesus are the church. Like, I can have church every day in my I actually do in my room every night before I go to sleep or when I wake up, and I'm grateful for, like, being alive another day.
yeah,
But
and
no,
I would
I
argue that
completely get
Jesus
it.
Christ agrees with us.
I agree so too. I agree that too. Have you ever seen Stigmata? Well, before we get into it though, let's
Before I get into my haterism of it all, just kidding.
no, not even. Did you wanna kind of run through what is Catholicism for the folks that don't know? We love words, and we love being accurate, and we love a good dictionary.
We love yeah, so what is Catholicism? So Catholicism is which I was actually kinda surprised because I don't know why I always felt that Catholicism was not like the less known not the less known, but it wasn't as popular in my mind,
The last
but
po
apparent
yeah, the least yeah.
but it's apparently the largest branch of Christianity, and it
Mhm.
is a monotheistic Abrahamic faith. So it means that they
Yeah,
believe in one God,
one
and
God.
then the Abrahamic aspect of it is that they trace its spiritual origins back to the biblical patriarch Abraham,
Right.
who, biblically was known as having of God asking him to sacrifice his only son to prove that he believed in God and, was dedicated to him, and then God was like, "No, don't do it. You were being tested and you passed." So
Yeah.
that's who Abraham is. Catholicism is centered on the belief of, like, life, death, and then the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So they, believe that Jesus Christ is God, but the Son version. Like, it's weird because I remember I was in mass, and the reason I remember this is that the priest was explaining it, where it's like, God exists as these 3 distinct beings, but they
Entities.
all make
Yeah.
up, like,
It's
one
one and the
divine nature.
same.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
all one and the same, but the
That's
Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So,
yeah.
or other people are like, "No, there's just God." Like, there's not all of these, or, like, some would say Jesus Christ isn't God, right? He's
Right.
like a prophet, not necessarily God, and that's
Right.
where Catholicism comes into play. It's like, "No, he is God."
That's where
Like,
it
just a
kinda
different
sorta
version of it.
deviates
Mhm.
in the branch of Christianity that it's in, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, I do think that's one of the key distinctions between Catholicism and some of the other branches of Christianity, to your point, that don't necessarily believe in the Holy Trinity, if you will.
Yeah, and then I think obviously one of the bigger identifiers for the Catholic Church is the Vatican. And I believe that church authority descends from this unbroken line that is from Jesus's disciple. And I think that's what they've kind of based it off of it, that Jesus gave the keys to the kingdom to Peter. And
Yeah.
technically, Peter is considered the first pope. Obviously, there's like discussions as to if this is true or not, but the Catholic Church doesn't believe that Peter is the first pope, and that's why there's, like, this
Started the
earthly
church.
head of the church, and that's
Yeah.
why there's this tradition of there having to be a pope appointed by, you know, or voted into this, which, again, this is why I'm like, how does this person have a deeper spiritual connection when he was voted into the role? But okay, who am I to say?
Right. And that's
Oops.
another episode where we deconstruct the Catholic Church.
Exactly,
That's our
and
follow-up. That's next week's episode, you guys. I'm just kidding.
it's like, "What?"
That would have been funny if we would have taken this out, or that episode out right before Easter.
Oh, yeah, or I'm like,
We're
right
about a month
before
late.
Christmas. No, I was
Oh,
kidding.
yeah. Yeah.
Before a Catholic, tradition, and yeah, but anyways, aside from that, they believe that divine revelation is transmitted through the Holy Bible and sacred tradition. And what I mean by sacred tradition is basically just the teachings that they give,
Mm.
and they believe, and how their expressions of faith are passed down orally. So there's some things traditionally that are done in the Catholic Church that are not necessarily found in the Bible. I think
Mhm.
some of those things is like how even the Bible itself, right? Like, the Bible itself doesn't have a table of contents that say these are the books that are in there. It's more so just like an oral tradition that they're like, "Hey, like, these are the books we're going to read from because they belong there," right? Even the
Yeah.
7 sacraments too, like, the way that they're structured and the order that they are supposed to be obtained is also more so like a sacred tradition, and it's not necessarily spelled out in the Bible per se.
Right.
We have, like, baptism, confirmation, Eucharist. I always remember that because of the song that we had to sing
Oh,
in,
really?
Catholic school. Like, that's how we would remember the 7 sacraments. It was baptism, confirmation, Eucharist, reconciliation, anointing of the sick, marriage, holy odor, and I think the reason we said that twice is because marriage, holy odor can kinda be switched depending on what path you take, because holy odor
Right.
could be, like, people taking up the
Being
becoming priests
priest.
or, like,
Yeah.
becoming
Or
nuns and
nuns or
stuff.
just giving
Yeah.
themselves yeah.
Exactly, and then, of course, like, going to church on Sundays, it isn't necessarily spelled out in the Bible that you have to, but
But
that's
it's part of it.
they chose to gather on Sunday because that's when Jesus resurrected in the Bible, right? It was on a Sunday
Right.
versus, like, I think the Jewish Sabbath, it's on a Saturday that they do
Mhm.
it, I forget,
Yeah.
but yeah. So,
Yeah, it is
yeah,
Saturday.
and then they believe
Yeah.
in saints and the Virgin Mary, and that they intercede for us during prayer.
I think that's another key distinction in Catholicism that contrasts with other branches of Christianity and other religions too, that
Yeah.
they don't necessarily believe in that. They actually think that's blasphemy. Yeah, I feel like as you're talking about the structure of Catholicism, and I think it's gonna go into play when we talk about why people are converting, and when you talk about the sacraments and even, like, I know the 10 are the 10 commandments spelled out? Because I know it's part of, like, Moses' story, but
Yeah.
I don't know if they're spelled out in are they spelled out in the Bible and such?
I
So,
don't know
I
if
have
they're spelled out in the Bible. Don't quote
but
me
yeah,
though.
but it could also be a form I mean, one can argue that was just, again, their way of enforcing what is it? Control over society. Like, this is how we're gonna keep people in check by having them like the sets of rules and protocols, and this is how we operate to be like a functioning society. And this is, how we sort of derive these ideas about what's morally correct, what's morally wrong, what's appropriate to do, like what's right and wrong and whatnot. But so you say that you don't refer to yourself as a Catholic then, because you don't necessarily subscribe to
Like, if
um
someone were to ask me, like, "Oh, like, do you consider yourself religious?" I always have a hard time saying, "Yes, I'm religious," because I don't necessarily think that Catholic-wise, I'm not religious,
mhm.
but I would say that I do have Catholic culture, if that makes sense. Like, culturally, I am
I
Catholic.
would I would say yeah,
Yeah.
because I do think that culturally you do practice Catholicism, or, like, there are Catholic practices that you participate, so
Mhm.
I can see that. Yeah, I think for me, when I've sort of relayed what I like, for example, if someone asks me, like, "Oh, what religion do you practice?" or "What are you?" Like, "Are you Catholic, Christian," whatever. I always say that I was raised Catholic because my
Mhm.
family, kinda instilled that in me. I was baptized, I did my confirmation. So I always say, "Oh, I was raised Catholic, my family's Catholic." But I do say, I don't necessarily align I'm not like an Orthodox Catholic. I don't necessarily practice Catholicism to the T. I'm more spiritual about it. I definitely do believe in baby Jesus, the Holy Trinity, and La Virgencita, and all the saints. But I have a very I would just say that I always say that, like, my relationship with God and baby Jesus and such, it's been something that I've sort of kind of built on my own, and obviously it's been influenced by what I learned by being raised Catholic, right? Because that's
Mhm.
where I have my foundation. But like I say, like, I don't necessarily believe in the institution of the church, and I do have a lot of grievances with a lot of the church teachings and such, but I also have benefited and have related to certain teachings on there too. So it's
It's
very
a
complex.
complicated relationship.
It is no, it is, it's very complex because if I boil it down to whether I believe and have faith in God, and again, like I said, baby Jesus, the Holy Trinity, love, and see that
Mhm.
absolutely, I
Yeah.
am, after all, God-fearing woman, but then I'm also like, God is a woman, and the church doesn't really follow that, so
No, and you know what? That's funny that you say that. It's funny you say that because I think I had seen this video where they're like, "God isn't a woman," and then they were like, "Walk with me." They're like, "Because a woman would never allow any of the
fair
shit
enough.
that's going." I'm like,
Well,
"That's true."
here's the thing, the reason why things are so screwed up and the reasons and, like, literally everything I hate about the institution of the church is because people got involved, specifically men, and they ruined it, right? Because if it was just, like, up to God, it wouldn't be this way, right? But because humans are involved and humans are faulty and, they kind of can't help themselves, this is why shit is messed up, and yeah.
And I think it has a lot to do with, like, going back to the idea of being culturally Catholic. It has obviously, it's some of that is rooted in the colonization and then
Mhm.
also the Catholicism of the Latino culture, which
Yeah.
I think some people would call, like, the folk Catholicism, right? And that obviously blends European teachings with, like, indigenous practices,
Right.
hence why I do think it's harder for us to separate religion and culture in our community and why it's so embedded in our community, and
Right.
I think that's also why, like, for me, even though I wouldn't necessarily say that, like, I'm religiously Catholic, La Virgencita, she's my girl. Like, I have, like, a very strong connection to her.
Right.
So even though I don't necessarily, like, go to church every week and, do all these, like, Catholic traditions that are expected of you as a Catholic, I
Mhm.
still am very much like, no, like, I do believe in God. I do follow the teachings that I learned from a very young age and I live them out and I try to hold myself to that, but I don't necessarily believe that, I need to go to church or that I need a religion to tell me how to live my life because
Right. Yeah.
that's not necessarily, at least from what I've gotten from the Bible, attending church,
Yeah.
that's not how I've understood it. It's like you can you can have a relationship, a divine relationship or a spiritual relationship,
Mhm.
but also just because you're religious doesn't mean you're morally good. Like, I don't equate morality with religion, and I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, in my opinion. It's like they equate being religious or being Christian, being Catholic to being morally good, and I'm like,
Yeah,
"Ah."
because and it's all just a freaking front. Because at the end of the day, how much evil and wrong things have been done to women, but, like, to people in general under the guise of religion, right? Like,
Mhm,
all the people that have been religiously persecuted. Even to this day, right, you have a lot of folks that are, for example, MAGA, and they're allegedly God-fearing Christians, and they're this, and they don't care about, like, the poor, the people that are underrepresented in, like, our administration, and they are like, very racist and, just because yeah, so it's just, like, it's really hard to kind of, like you said, to have this idea that, "Oh, just because you're religious, that means that you're somehow morally superior or morally good," because that's not the case. But
yeah.
there has always been this notion, though, that it's, like, religion is so long as you practice what is being taught, which is supposed to be good, right? To be of service to your community, etc., that you're going to be a good person. But last time I checked, the Bible doesn't teach hate, or actually, it's debatable. But
Depends what
I know,
testament we're looking
I know, right? Yeah, exactly. It depends the testament we're looking at, right? And that's why I've always been like, my God's not vengeful,
and
violent.
warmongering.
He's not yeah, he's not someone that I am meant I mean, I did say I'm a God-fearing woman, but it's not like yeah, I don't think he's like a violent and bad person that we're afraid of, and that's why it's sort of like we're beat into submission because we're afraid of what he's gonna do. Like, that sounds very toxic to me, and I was like, "God is love." Like, where do we get that from, guys? But like you said, it depends what testament you're going through.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, yeah,
and
very
again,
interesting.
and this is how we go back into, like, why there has been this sudden surge of Catholicism conversion, right? And
Mhm.
like you said, we've seen this a lot in Gen Z and Millennials. And then the question is like, why is it? Why are we seeing this uptick and revival of the Catholic Church?
Yeah, and I feel like it's interesting because I'd say that growing up Catholic, right? And even me as a millennial, as I transitioned into adulthood and like learned things and went to school and whatever, I have sort of spent my adult life unlearning things that I learned by being raised Catholic, right?
Mhm,
Especially the toxic and the damaging things, and also like learn to understand religion as it operates within a society and how it can be like a hegemonic thing that offers people a way to control other people and subject people to certain norms and ideas. And there I think there's also folks from like Generation X that sort of were like this atheist community, right? That were sort of rejecting religion and leaning into more of spiritual or just completely not at all, right? Or folks that were
mhm.
like agnostic. I remember I learned about being agnostic when I was a teenager. For example, my brother, he was like, I'm atheist, mom. He would tell my mom that as to why he wouldn't go to church with us on Sunday or why my mom couldn't get him to go to church because he said it was like against his, like, the man just didn't want to go to church.
Yeah.
So it's just funny. But yeah, I do think that in recent generations or in recent decades, there was definitely a surge of deconstructing religion and people sort of rejecting those kind of oppressive institutions, or at least they saw them as oppressive institutions.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that now we're seeing generations like Gen Z and even maybe ours kind of trying to subscribe to themselves again or reviving this or, converting, getting baptized and such.
Yeah, I think when it comes to answering this question, and like you mentioned, like where our generation came from as far as like being raised Catholic, I think most Latino communities or families would be considered conservative just based off of the fact that they are Catholic because of how conservative the Catholic religion is and how strict it is. And that's
Yeah.
why our generation questioning, or just kids in general questioning, like, why is it like that? Like, that doesn't make
Right.
sense. And it's always been like, well, that's just how it is, right?
Right.
And so that's kinda what pushed us from, like, having to deal, like you said, with this oppressive system and these oppressive beliefs per se. And it's like, well,
Mhm.
it doesn't make sense, right? Because you have like the Virgin Mary, for instance, if women aren't allowed to be in the Catholic Church or practice or be popes or whatever, then why
Yeah.
do we have the Virgin Mary? Like, and or some
Yeah.
other religions would also be like, yeah, the Virgin Mary doesn't matter, but it's like, why wouldn't she matter if she's also technically a pure being because it was a virginal birth? So she's without
Right.
sin
The Holy
also. So like
Spirit. Right.
make it make sense, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I think I guess this goes back to our pendulum talk, right? Where we were like,
Mhm.
when you go from one extreme to the other, from a very strict household, you go to the other side where it's like exploring liberation and blah, blah, blah. So now we are in a place now where it's the opposite. And I think that that's um, kind of what answers the question. I think it's more so what the idea of the Catholic Church offers, and I will agree that it does offer that because I think it's more so a cultural and psychological driver that we're seeing and
Mhm.
why that there's this again this uprising in Catholic conversion, and I think it's
Mhm.
because people want a sense of community. Again,
Yeah.
we are in a time where individualism is being pushed,
Yeah.
especially in this digital world, right?
The
You're being
capitalist society that we live
yeah,
in. Yeah.
you're being isolated, you trust people less because you think that everybody is out for themselves, right?
Yeah.
And then it
And no one yeah, you don't believe in the kindness of others. You don't believe
yeah.
in
Like, you
that
always think
people
that
are
they're after something, like, you
Yes,
just don't trust people anymore, right?
you
And then
don't.
everybody is kind of being pushed to believe that you're responsible for, like, your own success or your own failures,
Right.
and it's nobody else's fault but yourself. So, obviously, then this brings the question of, like, okay. And I think that was my question. If you're looking for community, why Catholicism? Because any other religion could also technically offer the same thing if you're looking for community, right?
Yeah, I think it's more appealing to them, and what I thought was interesting is, like, you were talking about the pendulum, right? And how, like,
Mhm.
we're in one side of the spectrum, and then it kinda changes, like, there's that cultural shift. I do think that we are in a period, again, where, to your point, when you're talking about, like, the individualism and such, and with technology and what have you, I feel like I see this as, like, history repeating itself, but in the sense that, like, after the Industrial Revolution, for example,
Mhm.
you had this, like, resurgence of, like, religion, if you had a lot of young creatives that were sort of, like, obsessed with the gothic Catholicism and just these
Yeah.
ideas, right? And it was because they were sort of rejecting or was like a counter to these big machines and all of that that felt so, like, alienating or inhumane, right? Or not inhumane, but, like, for example, how I
Well,
think
now
I
you have
wrote
these
it down.
machines that were taking over,
Machines,
like,
there you go,
jobs.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you transitioned into machines, and it kind of it's one of the we're seeing it now, right? With all the advances that we've seen with technology, with
AI.
AI, everything just feels so I don't know how to say it where it just feels so there's, like, a lack of humanity. I don't know,
Mhm.
like, it just feels so dry, and so people are kind of, like, looking for something that feels more grounding, something that feels more there's more depth, that it's not so superficial or even performative, right? Where we have all this social media and people like kind of just putting on a show or whatever. I think Catholicism kind of offers people a vehicle for community, like you said, but there's other religions that do it. So why this one? I would say that it is for the aesthetics to some degree, where people are very
Yeah.
much into, I mean, Catholicism or Catholics are hella maximalist, right? And so,
Yeah.
when it
And we're
comes to
living in
the
a very minimalistic, trending
Yes. Yeah,
world
in
right now.
recent yeah, in
Mhm.
recent decades, and because of this whole, like, this whole minimalistic ideas or just, like, this whole clean aesthetics, everybody's
Mhm.
fucking tired of that. Like, I remember the other day I was telling my sister, I was like, yeah, I was like, "It's so annoying how the architecture has become so
Yes.
blah," you know? And
Yeah.
I literally brought it up because I think we were passing by a McDonald's that's being built in Wilmington, and I was just like, "Oh, like, I hope it's not that stupid gray structure," because I feel like McDonald's used to be, like, structurally were a lot more fun and colorful, and all
Yeah.
of a sudden we
Even
have this, like,
Jack in the Box,
millennial
Carl's
gray.
Jr., they
Yeah,
have all
we're
transitioned to that ugly gray color. I think
yes, and it's so fucking bland, it's, like, minimalistic, it's probably cheaper to use, but I'm just like, it's so annoying and so boring, and everything just looks the same, and it just looks so not necessarily clean, but just dull, you know?
I think recently in New York, there was a building that was built that is in front of the is it the Empire State Building? And it's right in front, so it kinda ruins the
The
view,
view?
and people were,
Really?
like, so upset because they're like, "Why is this ugly a" it's not even
It's not
aesthetically
even
pleasing.
cute. It's not even
Yeah, and it's like
adding
an
to the
ugly
landscape.
ass building that's so basic, and it ruined and they're like, "Who permitted this, first of all?" I don't quote me, I think it is New York, and I do
Who
think it blocks
approved
them.
this?
Yeah, exactly, so I'm like, people are sick and tired of this basic as building, and I think you're right that Catholicism kind of falls into that, like, historic nostalgia of it all aesthetically,
Yeah.
right? Because all the Gothic architecture,
The
the
paintings, the
the
stained
paint
glass
the stained glass
windows,
it
and
yes,
and to your
love
point,
that.
because we venerate the Holy Trinity and we also, believe in the Virgin Mary and all of our saints, a lot of these churches have, like, saints that are, like, propped up. You have, like, for example, in our church, we have La Virgen de Guadalupe and her big mural. So there's so
Mhm,
much color, there's so much life, if you will, and I remember the word that I was trying to look for on my notes here, I meant sterile, that's what I wanna say. So you see like, these churches are so beautiful, and a lot of the churches that, at least a lot of Catholic churches, because those are pretty much the
mhm,
only churches I've ever been to, they're just they have a lot of character, and there's a lot of like, no one Catholic church is the same. You definitely have similar patterns, right? Like, because you have again, like, you have the saints, you have La Virgen, you have at the center, you have and honestly, just church architecture is so interesting and fascinating to me. That's why it was so cool when we went to Barcelona, and we got to go to what
yes.
was that church called? I forgot what it's called, but,
Las
Sagrada Familia?
I was gonna say La Sagrada Familia.
Was
It's that one,
it?
no? Yeah, La
Oh,
Basílica
cool.
Basílica de la
La
Sagrada
Basil
Familia. Yeah.
Yes. Going to that was so cool too. But anyway, there's I feel like Catholicism is more aesthetically pleasing. And again, I don't know because and maybe I'm biased because I've only been to Catholic churches. I have learned about other Christian type churches like in Europe, for example, especially like during the pre and post wars, because some of those buildings did get damaged and such.
Mhm.
But I feel like Catholic churches are the best. But
Yeah, I mean, I always look forward to anywhere I travel to go see a Catholic church. Like even in Mexico, like they have some of the most beautiful churches also. Like that's something
Mhm.
I think it's also the feeling of entering a Catholic church. I don't know if it's necessarily because I grew up Catholic and it's just a
Right.
nostalgic familiar feeling for me or
Yeah.
but even then like I could see how for someone who isn't born and raised Catholic that entering a Catholic church is overwhelming in a good way. You know what I mean? Like there's just
Yeah. It's a
something
lot of
alluring
beauty
about it.
in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I've never walked into a church and been like, "Oh, this is scary." There's a
Yeah.
lot of warmth in there too. I've never felt it to be a hostile environment in any way. It feels
Mhm.
always very inviting, and there's always this sort of you get this wash of just feeling peaceful when you're in there, no matter what you're walking in with. You kinda leave your bearings at the door. But, yeah, I do think that's the aesthetics have something to do with it because there's a lot of beauty in that, right? I do think that a lot of things are very chaotic, a lot of things are very scary, there's a lot of uncertainty. This administration alone, right? There's so much chaos, and I feel like turning to religion offers them sort of structure and certainty that they feel like they need for their own mental health or sanity, right? At least there's a part of that, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I do think I kinda echoing the community aspect of it, right? They're looking at this to kind of solve for some of the problems that, like, society isn't already solving for or not isn't readily available. Like, I saw a couple of interviews that they did for Gen Zers that were going to church, and
Mhm.
a lot of them cited just the certainty that it offers them in an otherwise uncertain world, right? And really kind of speaking to these spaces where they feel safe, right? And they feel like
Yeah.
if they're subscribing to these ideas, these teachings that tells you basically like do good so that good happens to you and your community, they're kind of like, okay, like I feel at peace because I know I'm like doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and so I'm gonna be
Mhm.
okay, right?
And that's
And
where
I was
my
just like, "That's
confusion
very
comes though.
interesting." Yeah.
That's where my confusion is because the reason I kind of brought forth this thing was because I had learned that the current vice president, JD Vance, converted from Protestant to Catholicism. But a lot
Interesting.
of the stuff that he was
That's just because
spewing.
he's gay. No, I'm just
Oh,
just kidding. I'm just kidding.
okay.
Uh,
A lot of
uh,
the stuff that he was saying was interesting
I feel like
because.
he burned himself in the Protestant church and just like, Henry VIII, but like c opposite, where he's kinda like, "I'm breaking from the Catholic Church so I can do whatever the fuck I want and make my own church."
Mhm.
Katie Vance is doing the same thing where, like, he probably got burned in his Protestant church, so he's like, "You know what? Let me go into something new so that I
Well,
can,
I
like,
was
start
looking into
anew."
his, like, trajectory, and he went from becoming a Protestant to atheist during, like, his 20s and then recently converted to
Checks
Catholicism.
out because of his generation.
And so
Yeah.
that was interesting to me because obviously that ties into how young men now are converting to Catholicism and what the draw is there.
Mhm.
And like you said, there's traditional discipline there, the historical structure of the Catholic Church, and then
There's a lot
dare
of
say like the
ritual, like,
clarity of the
right
teachings,
and
right?
wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the terms that I came upon in my research was called theobro. I didn't
I
even
saw
know that
that.
was a thing,
I
and
saw that.
apparently
I
it's
saw that.
basically a slang term for someone who I guess they identify as, like, they're highly online, they're, like, a very
They're
they're
influencers, they're, what is it,
they're
content
fierce
creators.
conservatives, they're young Christian men, and then they basically use digital media to, like, very aggressively debate theology and advocate for traditional patriarchy, obviously, and
Yeah,
Christian nationalism. And
right.
then from there, it went from, like, this internet niche to mainstream political analysis because of figures like JD Vance. And
Mhm.
so I thought that was interesting because 'cause I'm like, I think and that's where I dare say is the difference between or the misunderstandings of what Catholicism is or the teachings or how cradle Catholics understand it versus people who converted.
Yeah,
Um because they're using this movement of people or young men who are or just people in general who are converting to Catholicism, and they're kind of using it in parallel to, like, this traditional Catholicism where they both reject, like, progressiveness, they and I guess,
and
like,
change.
mental
Yeah,
health in a way, and then they
right.
identify any progressive movements done by the Catholic Church where it's more progressive and more accepting, for instance, for like the LGBTQIA that we saw a
Yeah,
lot of acceptance under like Pope Francis's term. I don't know what you call it.
yeah, it's
Um,
Pope Francis, yeah.
yeah, and they call it like soft Christianity because it doesn't uphold those traditional, very
Rigid
strict,
Orthodox
rigid,
ideas.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
I do see how it is offering them another vehicle for them to push this sort of their traditional ideology and this sort of
mhm,
rigid structures. 'Cause there is a lot of structure in Catholicism and the Catholic Church, especially when you look at the more orthodox and the more just when you look at it from, like, from a theological perspective and the practice of Catholicism in a more
mhm,
orthodox way, they're very rigid because that's where you get a lot of these anti-LGBTQ, rhetoric or beliefs, right? And then you also have the anti-abortion, for example, but to your point, in recent, decades, you have seen at least the popes that have been in place
mhm,
being a lot more I don't wanna say softer. Because I did reference our current pope is, of course, Leo, and his predecessor was Pope Francis, and obviously Pope Leo was an obvious, like, person to come after Pope Francis because he has also been very, like, benevolent, and he's also very gentle, his approach has been very gentle and
mhm.
compassionate, if you will, right? And at least Pope Francis was very beloved, and I think Leo is trying to kind of fall into those steps, and he's actually been a little bit more political with, like, being anti-war and really kind of renouncing the Trump administration and some of the actions that they've taken and such, and it's very interesting because I think it was previously believed that, like, religion and politics shouldn't mix, right? Or that it was kinda like you need to stay in your lane, that's why we have the division of the church and state. at least in
Mhm.
the United States, for example, but it's kind of hard not to because everything is political and there is a lot of influence there. But,
Yeah. I mean, I think under Pope Francis, obviously, like we mentioned, he was kind of like a breath of fresh air, especially for us millennials coming out of
yeah.
that rigidity and kind of pushing back on that. And that's what Pope Francis kind of focused on because he wanted to move the church forward into modern times because he believed that the ideological traditionalism um, and just in general, the Catholic Church resistance to progress is
Mhm.
what was preventing the Catholic Church from growing
Growing
and
and staying
turning
alive and
away youth,
mhm.
right? Because
Yeah.
it was focusing more so on the rules than the idea of faith. And that's
Mhm.
why he was kind of like, no, we're going to accept everybody. As long as you believe in God and,
Mhm.
you have faith in God, you're welcome to the
It
Catholic Church.
yeah, it wasn't as exclusionary, if you
Yeah,
will. And
exactly. And
and I and I wonder if that's also why people have chosen or leaned into Catholicism because of this whole recent trend of it being not exclusionary, but, like, being more, like, inviting, if you will. When I think about, for example, people that are Christian, right? And not all
mhm,
Christians, because I know some very good Christian folk, but I feel like when I've learned about people that are identify themselves as Christians
mhm.
and their approach to the Bible and what the Bible says, like, it just feels very extreme, very rigid, and how they very much
Mhm,
look down on people that are engaged in worldly things and not things that are, like, faithful or living according to the word of God, and they take the Bible very literally, I feel, or some folks do, at
mhm,
least some branches of it. You have folks that are Jehovah's Witness who don't partake in any sort of celebration outside of, I don't know, like, baby showers and weddings and such, and they all feel a lot more rigid than what I've known Catholicism to be in at least the generation that I grew up in. And even recently, but I mean, I don't know because I'm not too familiar with all these other branches. So, again, I'm just speaking from what I know, and I'm curious
yeah,
if those other places are as inviting, or those other religions are as inviting or as accessible.
well, because we've seen an increase of, people converting from Protestantism to Catholicism, so I kinda
Mhm,
had to look up, I'm like, "Okay, then what's the difference between Protestants and Catholics," right? And I saw that the fundamental difference between those 2 is that it comes down to the authority and salvation, so, apparently, Protestantism relies solely on the Bible, and they view salvation as a I guess you can say like a free gift that's
mhm,
received through faith alone. So when it comes to us growing up Catholic, obviously we learn that salvation is an ongoing process. Like it's not something that's just granted to you because you're
yeah,
reading your Bible. You have to prove yourself through your faith, but also through your actions, right?
actions,
And of
yeah,
course you have to get your sacraments, right? You can't be saved unless you have your sacraments.
mhm,
So when it comes to the difference between the cradle Catholics and then the converted Catholics, I have, and maybe this is just me, but I think that when you're discussing conversions, and I think also it applies to me because maybe that's why it's harder for me to let go of like some Catholic teachings that I have because it's something I grew up with. So when
mhm,
it comes to the conversions, I think that it also applies to them because they are also coming from a different religion that they maybe grew up
mhm,
learning, right? And so some of these religions, for instance, they're kind of taught to talk about their faith, and we
mhm,
see this often when we're comparing like evangelical Christians, right? Where it's
right,
their duty to like spread the word of the gospel
yes, yes,
versus being raised Catholic, where we're taught and encouraged to live what we're being taught, right? So, like
yeah,
in
we
Mass,
practice it, yeah,
yeah, in Mass, we read, the Bible, we have, like, this whole what is it, the liturgy or something like that? And so I remember, like, one of the Mass s some one of the biblical
scriptures,
scriptures
yeah,
that was Jesus Christ and the Samaritan woman at the well, right? And then the priest kinda goes into, what the lesson is there and how, maybe encourage us to, like, love other people, and, despite, like, the
there's always
race,
a
the
message,
gender. There's
yeah,
always a message, and you're always encouraged to go out after Mass and, like, love
yeah,
thy neighbor. The Mass
yeah,
in itself after I forget after see, I haven't been to Mass, but after you're supposed to shake, or I think it's after
af
communion,
yeah,
you shake
it's after
everybody's
communion.
hand and, like, your neighbor, and you're like, "God be with
They don't
you,
do that
bless you."
I
They
think
stopped
after
it after
COVID.
COVID, yeah,
Yeah, but
but
there's still
before
a moment where we kinda turn around and acknowledge each other.
acknowledge, yeah.
There's not so much the hand holding anymore and, like, the
Mhm.
handshaking, but there's still, like, a moment where you turn around and sort of acknowledge everybody and kinda just, like,
Yeah.
give them or, like, pay respects, if you will.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back into, like, the whole community aspect because even just
Mhm.
talking about it last week, you mentioned ho the fundraising that was done so that people could give back, and when you're doing your first communion or even your, confirmation, you have to go to
Mhm.
Catholic school, and
Yeah.
so even in Catholic school, you had to do your volunteer hours. You had a specific amount of volunteer hours that you had to fulfill in order to be approved
Mhm.
to get your confirmation, right? And I think that's what I mean about being, like,
Yeah, I remember that.
Catholic culturally, because it's something
Yeah.
that I still have to live by even though I don't
Yeah.
necessarily associate myself to the institution.
Yeah, I think that is a really good call out because there is this sense, or at least growing up Catholic, of how you are encouraged to be of service to your community, be of service to your neighbors, because that's what you're supposed to do. That is one of the key markers of how you sort of practice being Catholic and kinda earn your points, if you will,
Mm,
in addition to prayer, to going to mass, to doing your, what is it when you go and tell your sins to a man? Confession. You have to do
confession.
confession because, for example, you can't partake
Tell
in,
my
like,
confessions. That's
yeah,
okay.
because you can't partake in communion unless you have been confessed, because then that would be a
Which,
sin. And this
again,
is
I
why
think
I don't partake in. I'm like, I confess my sins, like, every so often to baby Jesus and such in live as I've done them and stuff, but I haven't confessed to a man probably since, the last time I baptized a child.
see, that's one of the things the priests, when I went to church, called out. His thing was like, you can take the Eucharist because at the beginning of the mass, you say, you
I'm
basically
sorry, you
repent for
already
your
can.
sins at
Yeah.
the beginning of the mass. So technically, you should be able. And I'm like, thank
It's
you.
like, yo
Thank you,
confieso
sir.
ante
Yeah.
Dios Todopoderoso que he pecado mucho de pensamiento, palabra, obra y omisión. Por mi culpa, por mi
Por mi
culpa,
culpa, por mi
por
gran
mi gran
culpa.
culpa. Oh my god,
Yeah.
we just created church on this episode, you guys. You guys are now absolved of all your sins. Just kidding.
Bro.
Yeah.
N
No, it's
and
true. I actually
yeah.
have heard that before. And so there was a time that I would go and still partake in communion, and then after a while, it felt a little um, performative of me, so then I just stopped doing it. It didn't
I
set my soul to still do it, even though say that it was okay.
I always find it funny because, we talk about, how Catholicism brings in this community, and it's true because when you go to mass, you always know what mass you're going to. I'm going to the 11 a.m. mass, and basically everybody who goes
The
there because
same
usually
people
you go
go.
to the
Yeah,
same
you
mass
stick to
unless
the same
something
schedule.
happens that you have to switch the schedule and then you go to a different one. But usually you stick to the mass that you usually go to. So you get to
Yeah,
know the people, you shake hands with usually the same people, you
the
sit in
same
the same
faces.
pillars. Sometimes I think nowadays they switch the priests. It's not like the same priest at the same time. They usually switch out the priests for, whatever times. But I always looked forward to seeing how different priests conducted mass differently. I remember, I don't know if it was with you when we went to Laura's daughter's baptism. Was it the priest that talked about movies?
I think
And he
so.
used,
I
yeah,
remember we had, like, a pretty, like, decent
yeah.
experience at that
And I
church, yeah.
remember there was this, I don't know if it was with you or if it was another time that I went to mass for whatever reason. I don't know why I went.
Was it for your
But I know
cousin's wedding?
maybe, I don't know, but I don't think so because there was a lot of
For
people there.
Miriam's wedding?
So I
Oh,
don't know what it was for, but the priest used movies as a way to kind of like relate the
relate, yeah.
lesson in the mass. So I always thought that was interesting. So that's why I'm like, oh, like this is so fun to go to. As an adult now, it's like, yeah, but as a kid, I'm like, that was the only thing that kept my attention. But also it's so structured that when
Yes.
it's almost so close to being ending. Once the Nicene Creed was on, I'm like, "Bitch, we're almost out of here. It's almost time to go."
For me, it was always, like, after communion. Like, once
Yeah.
we did communion
No,
and we
but
did
once the
like that, I'm
Nicene
like,
Creed came on, you're like, "Okay,
yeah.
communion's right after this, and after that, we're out. We're out of this bitch, and we
Yeah.
can go home. We're gonna go hometown buffet, and we're gonna go eat, and then we're gonna go home."
You're like, "Imma get fed." No,
Yes.
that's so funny because, yeah, I think when I was looking at this and how people were kind of referencing or just this again, this structured and this ritualistic approach to religion that people were
Mhm.
sort of adhering to or leaning into because of that, because of the predictability. Again, when people are like, "Oh, there's so much uncertainty, I'm looking for something that can ground me, something with more structure, somewhere where I can know what to expect." So,
Mhm.
in a lot of ways, Catholicism offers that sort of structure in the way that they run mass, to your point, right? The prayers are all the same. You have specific prayers for specific occasions or specific things, like I was just regurgitating earlier when you're doing your I forgot what I forgot what that prayer is, but yeah, you pull up to church and you're on and you just know what's to follow and such.
And even
And
if you don't know the prayers, you will eventually catch on. Because I
because
remember
it's
as a kid, I'm like, I didn't know the prayers, but I remember the Nicene Creed, like, "I believe in one God, Father Almighty, what is it, maker of heaven and earth, blah, 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 blah," and
agreed, yeah.
I'm like, when it came down to my
I
confirmation, I
only know
had
it
that
in
prayer
Spanish.
down.
Yeah. No, yeah,
Yeah, in
and
Spanish
even when
too. I like
I
cuando
only know
fue
them in Spanish.
crucificado, murió I'm like, I always like that
Fue
section because it's
crucificado,
like
murió y resucitó al tercer día.
yeah. I always like how the
Y está
w
sentado a la derecha de Dios. No, yeah,
yes.
because that is the
He's
creed.
like,
That
"He
is
suffered death and
that
was buried."
that is literally the Catholic, national anthem,
Yeah, literally.
or your pledge of allegiance,
Pledge
whatever
of
you wanna
allegiance to
use.
the Catholic Church, to what
Yeah,
is it? The Roman Apostolic
una
Catholic Church.
yeah, es una yeah, literally, es una romana, apostólica, quién sabe qué. Pero yeah, I only know religion in Spanish in terms of, like, I only know the prayers and, like, the scriptures and all that in
Mhm.
Spanish. In English, I don't know.
My
I've always been
confirmation, you had to go do a test with and you had to take your padrino or your madrina with you. My
your
madrina for my
sponsor. Yeah.
confirmación was my grandmother, so she came with me, and
Aw.
then you have to recite I think it's the Apostles' Creed, and I remember I memorized it fully in English and in Spanish, and I did both, and then the person was like, "Yeah, you don't have to do all of it, like, in fully, you can do the short version." I'm like, "Girl, I spent this whole time remembering
I
the
know.
long version." For you
I
to tell me this? Are you
No.
serious?
Literally, we have lost standards because when I was younger and we were, like, in like, in communion classes, it was, like, ingrained in us that, like, you need to learn your prayers and you need to memorize them because you're gonna be tested on this, and if you don't
Mhm.
pass them, you can't have your
You
communion.
can't yep.
And they scared us straight into it, you know? And then I remember because my younger cousins or later generations that went through their communion, those kids did not know their shit. I would tell them and they would not know, and they didn't give a fuck. They still did their communion. And, to this day, they don't know it. And even, like, all the times that we've prayed rosaries with my mom, I've even memorized those because it's, like, it's the repetition of it all.
Yeah, I don't think I have those memorized, but I have, like, how you do the rosary memorized, but I don't necessarily have oh my god, what is it
Well,
called?
because they're called misterios, so it's the
Yes, the
misterios.
mysteries, and then you do the prayers of El Padre Nuestro, and then the, Hail Marys, right? So I never had the mysteries, memorized, so I would never want to like, when we pray, they're like, "Oh, who wants to do the first mystery? Who wants" I'm like, "I'm not doing that because I don't know what the hell it is." So I would never
My
volunteer.
mom
My
always had her
mom would
little booklet.
volunteer for me for it. Yeah, but I didn't have the booklet, so then
My
they
mom
would just
well,
tell me
because
what it is, and I would follow up, but I'm like, "No, I don't wanna do that. I don't wanna
I
be responsible for leading
mom
prayer."
would my mom would pass it around to each of us, and it's like, "Okey, Karen, te toca a ti ser el primer misterio,"
Yeah,
and then I would
no.
do the
It's like,
segundo, and
"No,
my dad
thank
would do the
you."
third. But my mom had the booklet, and she would just pass it around. And, yeah, it
Yeah,
was
but
interesting
there was
because you
just too
had
many people. It's like, 30 people in one house in a fucking small ass
you're like,
space
"I don't wanna read
praying,
out loud. Don't popcorn read me." No,
and then
just
we have to do it in Spanish, so obviously some people felt a little self-conscious because, like, the
Yeah.
Spanish isn't perfect. But
I thought it
yeah.
was a good way to practice though, but I can get, like,
Yeah.
the anxiety. It's like when you were in school and you were called to popcorn read and then you're like, "Ah!" And it's like, it's not that I don't know how to read, it's just, like, stumbling on my words. A lot of people had that kinda stage fright. Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
with the mysteries, it depends on what day you're praying too, because it's like, depending on the day you're praying, you're either doing los misterios dolorosos, los gozosos, los gloriosos, and just like
I will say my favorite ones are los glorioso wow.
Sorry.
It's me.
I
I'm
don't
the
know,
one who I'm
in
the
my
one
head
who had a hard time speaking in Spanish. It's me.
sorry, in my head, all I heard was goloso. That's why
Imagine someone says,
I'm
"El
sorry.
misterio goloso," then
No, it's literally has happened to us, like, the amount of like, oh my god, every time we played the rosary, it was always a thing where, like, me and Karen had to lock the fuck in because if not, we'd be cracking up over things or we'd, like, laugh at stuff, and my mom would be so mad and she'd be, like, eyeing us and stuff. It was yeah.
no, I mean, I think when we were in COVID, I made it a point to try to learn to do the rosary and I did actually memorize it, but now I haven't, so I need to get back into that.
Like
But kinda going back into, why people are attracted to Catholicism and, like, the rigidity of it, I think that's the one thing that I wanted to point out as to, like, the difference between, like, the cradle Catholics and the convert Catholics is that because they're coming from this other religion or and I think they're too by the book. Because Catholicism is already so rigid, I think us cradle Catholics kinda grew up with the knowledge that there is a gray area in everything and that, we should love our neighbors and whatever, like, there are,
but there are
th
boundaries to
there
this,
are
we're not just
boundaries, right?
blindly yeah.
Exactly. But when it comes to, like, people who are recently converting to that is that because there's so much uncertainty in the world or whatever it is that they're trying to push and
They're leaning into
conservatism and
that.
everything is that they're seeking, like, the moral absolutes of everything, the
Yeah.
traditional family structures that the Catholic Church pushes. And
Yeah,
then
marriage. Yeah.
I've seen and I saw that a lot of them were converted via, like, rigorous philosophy and that they expect everything to be very strict and consistent. So like I said, it's very black and white. And I noticed a lot of them, especially men, reference the philosophical and theological writings of Saint Thomas Aquinas, who basically for people who don't know, so he basically believed that faith and reason are complementary to each other. So he believed that there was like a
Mhm.
natural order and a
Mhm.
purpose to everything. And I was like, "Oh, so that's why this is so interesting." Because we've seen a lot of like right conservative men
Mhm.
now become Catholic, aka JD Vance, and are
Yeah.
pushing this
This ideology
idea
or
of the
these like
traditional family of gender roles and
structure.
whatnot, and
Yeah.
they're using this philosophical and theological writing by Saint Thomas Aquinas to kind of back up their position, and I
Right.
was like, "Oh." And so I'm like, yeah, Catholicism in general is a very traditional religion. That's why a lot of us cradle Catholics were questioning these traditions, but now
Right.
it's coming back through the pendulum because there's so much liberty, I guess, and like you said, so much instability and I'm like in a world where there's a lot of war being waged and people are being killed for stupid reasons.
Yeah.
People are now weaponizing it, I would say, again, and
Yeah.
pushing this agenda that I felt we've come so far, even under Pope Francis, in being
Yeah.
more modern and not necessarily there's nothing wrong with having tradition. I think that's good because even you and I have talked about it, like, this is something that I feel protective right now over the the Catholic religion because 'cause I'm like, "No, you guys aren't getting it." Like, this
Yeah, like,
isn't
first of all, don't fucking give us a bad name. Don't give
our
Catholics a bad name, but first of all, it's not even them. Catholics already been giving themselves a bad name for other reasons, but, that is not the episode. But I no, I do think it
well, the
sucks
Catholic
because it's
institution
almost
has
like it's
given themselves a bad name. It's not
yeah,
Catholics in it's the institution. But now you guys are trying to give Catholics a bad name because you are using what you were taught via the evangelical Christianity and weaponizing it because you're like, "Oh, the Bible." I'm like, "Yes, the Bible is something that the Catholic Church uses, but it's not like you have to live by it." Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
knows it's hearsay too. Everybody knows that it's not even the original material, the source material, like,
Well, yeah,
that
it's
has
been
been
translated,
passed
so and that's why I think I've
exactly
seen that there's a push
to
to go back to the Latin mass
text.
where
I saw
yeah,
that. I saw
yeah.
that and, like, really kind of practicing the traditional because even folks were saying, like, at the end of the day, Catholicism or, like, you practicing this, they were like, "The vibes aren't gonna save you. The aesthetics are not gonna save you." Like, all this, like, fluff that you're leaning into, like, that's not what Catholicism is about. Like, it's, like, the tradition stuff. It's, like, the mass, the prayer, the living, like, to living according to the Bible and the practices and practicing the teachings of God and what have you. And I
Mhm.
thought that was funny how people were, like, saying that. Um, yeah, I think like everything else, like you wanna be critical when someone is being so pushy and trying to sort of like impose these ideas or this way of living. So I think you're right. I think when you look at these sort of like, what are they called? Those bros? What did you say they were called?
Theo bros?
These Theo bros, they're over here again, just finding another way to weaponize religion and finding another way to use this to sort of
Impose
a
themselves.
yeah, and their agenda is to sort of subjugate people to be like, "Oh, life is this way, and this is how you're supposed to be, and if you don't subscribe to it, you're a bad person, you're morally corrupt, you're this and that." Because then it justifies their violence or their aggression or their disapproval of people, and that's why politics and specifically like conservative folks have always relied on religion as a way to sort of what is it? What we were talking about, just like weaponizing it and to get away with
Yeah.
murder because it's like it's easier for them to justify their actions towards, for example, coming for LGBTQ rights, coming for trans folks, coming for immigrant people, coming for women's rights because oh, you want to practice abortion and kill babies and this and that. Like that's that's what they
Yeah.
use it for. And
Yeah.
that's where it's tricky and it sucks because that's or at least, like, I like to believe that's not what practicing religion or, like, practicing prayer and all this it shouldn't be that, like, you should be promoting goodness, you should be promoting community, not, like, hating each other. You shouldn't be teaching hate, you shouldn't be you I think it's a huge slap in the face to God to be using it to subjugate people or to try to impose,
Well, I think
things on people.
that's why I was saying, like, that was my question, and I think that's why I was knocking my head upside down. I'm like, "Why Catholicism? Like, why all of a sudden, why that religion?"
Mhm.
Because obviously we've seen politics use Christianity, and that's something that the current administration is using Christianity as a way
Yeah. The
to,
religious right.
impose their
Yeah.
moral, which again, this is why I say, like, just because you're religious doesn't mean there's uh, it doesn't
That you're
equate to
good.
morality,
Which is what
and
they're trying to what
yeah.
they're purporting, right? And that's what
But
these
then I'm
little
like, why Catholicism out of all the things? And I'm like, it makes sense because it does technically uphold every single thing that they're trying to push, like the traditional family values, but I'm
they're
like, but
trying to find a
also
new brand is what I'm thinking. They're trying to find a new brand because they're low key already like tarnished Christianity and
y
Christians. So they're like, we gotta infiltrate the others, especially
yeah,
because
that's
there
what I'm
is
trying
more
to wonder, like,
progressive
why are you
there.
infiltrating this? What's the goal here? And then that's why when Pope Leo became Pope and he was an American, I'm like, what's happening? Something's off.
Well,
But
that's why they
then
hate him.
no, but
Specifically
that's
this
why
admin.
no, I'm speaking as an American who saw an American pope be elected pope after so many years of having,
Oh,
like, someone that's, Latin America or someone from Europe, and I just thought that that was interesting that it was an American pope, or an American was selected as a pope, and I was kind of like, "Oof," like,
what
how
are
is
they
this
trying to
going
do
to
there?
play out knowing the type of presidents we have, but now seeing how things are playing out, I'm like, "Oh, okay." Um, because, when you're an American, there's this certain, um, pride that comes with being an American, this certain
Mhm,
ideology when it
mhm.
comes to religion in America, and I think Pope Leo in this aspect is more so focusing on the Western side of things in his papacy. Is that what it is? I
Yeah,
think that's what it is. So I'm keeping an eye on Pope Leo, or I started keeping an eye on him as soon as he was elected because I wanted to see exactly what he was going to do in this position, being an American and having the political environment that we have now and like what's going on with like immigrants
mhm.
and stuff. And immigrants, especially Latino immigrants, being Catholic and, having a high percentage of Catholic Latinos, like how was that
Yeah,
affecting it? Because I'm like, it's so interesting because technically, Latinos are conservative because we grew up Catholic, so we
mhm.
do have some conservative values of, like, the family and all that stuff.
The family
So I
structure,
can
yeah.
so I can see how some identify as Republicans, and then you have the pipeline of MAGA, that's, like, a whole different thing. So I'm like,
Yeah.
why how are all of these tying together? And this is, like, my little conspiracy brain. I'm like, American Pope, America, Trump, Catholicism, immigrants, Latino immigrants in specific, and then everything that's
Well
going on with, like, people being anti-Israel, and then also pro-Israel, and how all of that is tie in because you would think that if you're trying to push a certain agenda, that you would go for a different religion and not Catholicism. But again, this is me and my little conspiracy theory, and this
Right.
is the hole that I'm currently trying to figure out. Um,
Yeah. She's like, this is what currently keeps me up at night. This is what I'm currently
yeah.
noodling on." No, but I think those are valid points that you made because even when we think about I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about as I was reading this or just sort of because I was thinking like, okay, this is like the trends, like this is what they're showing, right? And I sat there and looked around and I was like, have I noticed that in my immediate sphere, right? Like have I noticed like, for example, my nieces and nephews that are like Gen Zers, like, are they doing like, is this something for them? No, they're
Yeah.
not. But they already grew up sort of Catholic on our vein, right? And then I'm looking at, okay, millennials for my age and like folks that I keep up with from that I went to school with. And I was like, well, a lot of them were already very much religious because they kind of grew up like me. We all went to the same churches, this and that. And they got married by church, they baptized their kids or they're baptizing their kids. So they're very much following in those footsteps that I assume them to. So I haven't really seen like, oh, a resurgence, but that's because we grew up in it and people never really left, if you like there was always this anchor. Oh, but it's because it's very interesting to think about Catholicism and the Catholicism that we experience versus like East Coast Catholicism, right? And like
What do you mean
and
East Coast?
when I'm talking about, like, people that are Catholic, but they're, like, Irish Catholic,
Oh,
like like, they're not necessarily their version of Catholicism, but, like, culturally, there are some nuanced differences because to your point, we had a lot of the indigenous teachings and all the mixing that happened because of colonization and what have you, right? So,
mhm.
I also thought that was interesting because some of the, articles that I was reading were more so focused on that type no, I don't wanna say that type because it is still Catholicism, right? But it's like,
That branch
for
of
example
Catholicism.
yeah, you're looking at, for example, like, a lot of the references were of, like, St. Joseph's Church in New York and all
Mhm.
these that they did see, like, people just showing up in more numbers, and you're seeing younger folks converting, and you have all these social events that have sort of sprung up, right? Where they do from pizza to pews, I think is what they were saying, where they have events where they eat pizza before church, and then they're also hosting, like, wine and theology nights, and this is where it offers these social spaces for people to gather and look
Do
for
you
community, and some people are also, like, even looking at it for dating, right? Like, instead of relying on like dating apps or like, let me find a good man's here, a good God fearing man's here. But then it's like, okay, what kind of dudes are showing up, right? Are we getting those fucking bros? Because you have people coming in, they're like people that work in tech and startup companies going to these events. You have people that are fresh out of college that are also kind of, recently converting. And so I was just like, oh, it's very interesting because you do have different people showing up for different reasons but they're all in these spaces and they're all so they're all converging together and it'll be interesting to see whether, like, these trends are gonna continue or if they're gonna be different. Because then you also are curious if people are just doing it because you also have a lot of, like, influence there, right? Like, they're doing it for the gram, it's very performative, it's not necessarily because they are truly trying to convert, and maybe they convert, but they're not actually practicing the teachings,
well,
so
I think this kinda ties back into, like, when we were talking about the Theo Bros and how the
Mhm.
Theo Bros are very much associated, I feel, or tied back into the whole red pilling of it because it's very similar, doctrination, I guess you can call it, where it's the
And
rigidness of the religion, the rigidness of being physically fit, the political aspect of it, and that's where my interest came into it because I'm like, personally, I've never seen a political figure push Catholicism on a political aspect. It's always been Christianity, it's always been the Christian branch.
shout out to
Even though
JFK who was a Catholic, though.
yeah,
He put
true,
Catholicism on the map for us
but I think a
in the
majority but
US.
that's what I'm saying, like, a majority of the time, it's always just been Christianity or it's been, like,
Yeah, the
people
religious
being
right has
Jewish,
always been
right?
Christian, yeah.
Yeah, or Judaism, so, for me, seeing Catholicism now be at, like, the top of what you would say is, like, where the whole world is watching is interesting to me, and then having these young men who are conservative and some maybe even identify as MAGA or Republican,
Mhm.
going into these, Catholic environments is interesting to me. So that's why I'm like, "Why Catholicism?" But then you mentioned, the dating aspect. I'm like, "Okay, so they're treating this as a what is it?
We were talking
A
about
third
third
space are
space.
dying. They're dying." And so now it
Well,
seems
yeah,
that
people are looking for a community,
church
yeah.
kind
an
of
avenue
filling
for
that
that.
void of the dying of the 3rd space, so that's
'Cause
interesting to me.
it has always been a 3rd space,
Yeah,
right?
but it hasn't
For
been a popular 3rd space. So then I'm
exactly, it
like,
hasn't been a
what's the
popular one.
popularity, right? So it hasn't always been one, so that's why I'm like, "Oh, that's
Well, they're making it
interesting."
fetch, which is funny because you get, like, these younger generations which are making it, like, funner, if you will, or easier for them to relate to it. That's why they're hosting all these events that it's making, like, "Oh, it's fun to go to church. Imma get to eat pizza." You know how earlier you were talking about, like, "Oh, after church, I'm gonna go eat, like, hometown
A
buffet,"
hometown
which is
buffet.
you know,
Yeah.
like, you start associating these things with, like, positive things, so it makes you wanna go, and like you said, we definitely were in a crisis, or we definitely have suffered from a decline of 3rd spaces. So where are people finding these 3rd spaces? In these very more interesting, right? And it
Mhm.
just sucks because it's like, if we would just have better infrastructure and have better better access to parks and other 3rd spaces and more, like, finance, like, public funding for these spaces, I don't think we'd be running to these 3rd spaces in church, but, people are finding this to be a
I mean,
3rd
and
space that's become very popular.
yeah, I mean, and that's not to, like, yuck on
Knock
anybody's
it.
yum. If you
Yeah.
guys want to go to church and that's your thing, like, obviously 100% support it. I think for me, it's more so, what's the end goal here? What is the agenda? And are you truly in it for the idea of that, I believe in this and spiritually, like, it's good for me? Because I get it. I haven't been to church in a while, but there was a point in time where I
It was
felt that
very
I needed to go to church and it was a very like, what is it? It was a very, cathartic feeling for me once I, like, went by myself. It wasn't even during mass, it was just a point of sitting down in
mhm,
the church for a few minutes and just, like,
releasing and
releasing
being there.
whatever feelings I had in writing, and it was a great experience, but other than that, I mean, again, this was more so because that was the spiritual connection that I had. But
Mhm,
when you are starting to involve politics, right? For instance, I think one of the things I saw with Pope Leo not being okay or not approving of the war that's going on with um Iran. Was it Iran or Iran, sorry if I mispronounced that, and not supporting it, and then you have someone like JD Vance coming out and saying that all the things that the Pope is saying, and that pissed me off, and I'm like, "Don't," and I'm like, "Why?" I don't again, I don't agree with the Catholic institution, but don't make me come out and defend it. You know what I mean? Like,
you're like, "Great,
that's
now you
so
made me come
annoying.
and defend it." Like, that's how fucking
Yeah.
yeah.
And he
Well,
was like,
yeah.
everything the Pope has to be careful in what he says. Everything he says has to be in, like, theological fact. And I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me, sir?"
Oh, not another factual person.
I'm like, not to shit on anybody who converts, but I'm like, if you're converting, like, you need to really understand the religion that you're converting into. Like, not everything is so black and white. And I think that's what people want so bad now because
Mhm.
they're like, it's either this or it's that, and I'm like, "That's not how the life works,
World
sorry." Like,
works.
it doesn't
Everybody
work like
yeah,
that, and I know you
yeah.
guys want it to work like that so bad, but it doesn't, and
Stop
you
trying to make
can't make
fetch
a religion
happen.
work like that either because it's not black and white. Just because the
It's a
Bible said, "Go kill these people," or God said, "Go kill these people," it's like, morally, is that
I'm
okay?
sorry,
You
did
know what I
someone say eye for an eye? I'm just kidding. What?
And it's like, you kinda have to read in between the lines sometimes,
Well,
and
that's the
that's
whole thing where it's like it's the interpretation of it, and that's
yeah.
where, like, also it's like you take from it what you get, and, like, hopefully, if you're have a good soul, you're not gonna interpret it in a negative way, or you're not gonna use it as a means to cause harm to anybody, right? But, yeah, I think to your point, it's definitely an interesting phenomenon, especially because you look at, like, the societal aspects that have sort of paved the way for this or to
Mhm,
happen, right? The political stuff that's going on, and you look at it from a macro level with the whole world, but then, like, at a micro level, what's happening in the United States alone, right? With our
mhm,
politics and all the changes with this administration. And yeah, you can't help but wonder like why Catholicism? Why now? And I think we would be amiss to not question it, and to not question the
mhm.
motives and because I'm sure like the Catholic Church as a whole is just salivating at the mouth because it's like there's power in numbers. So to know that, the church is growing and that there is this resurgence and this revival, they're like, "Yay, we have more numbers, whatever." But it's like, is it though?
Mhm.
Like what kind of numbers are
It's
we
like, are
really
you
getting here?
it's like,
What kind
yeah,
of
what people are
religious
you
soldier?
getting into this
Yeah,
community, right?
to your point, like, not faulting anybody that wants to that is leaning into it, that is trying to find, a way to make sense of the world and a way to make sense of everything that's happening. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I do think that, again, we'd be amiss to not be critical about it. Don't fall into it so blindly, if I can, if for better words, because like I said, like, as much as, like, I enjoy practicing Catholicism sometimes when it makes sense for me, when I want to, if you will, there's still a lot of things that I wrestle with, right? And there's still a lot of things that I'm like, and it's like an everyday thing too of like, well, do I subscribe to this? Do I not? This is why I don't go to church very often. And if I do, it's only for special things and special occasions. And some people would probably say that I'm not even a real Catholic because I don't necessarily partake in some of the rituals and
Actually, that's
the
one thing I would disagree because I'm like, I think at least my understanding of Catholicism has always been like, once you're Catholic, you're always a Catholic and you're never gonna
yeah,
necessarily
you can't
like,
move
it's
out of
never
it.
yeah, you can never leave it, which is true. It's like we said, there's always gonna be culturally Catholicism is always gonna be a part of us culturally, and we still
Mhm.
practice some things and, live by some things. But again, I think it's mostly because of the way we understand it, but also and this is why I think we encourage people to get out and travel and see new things because, again, the world isn't black and white, and the more you're exposed to different people, different cultures, different religions even,
Mhm.
you kinda have a sense of understanding of who you are as a person, but also there are good things happening in the world. I think we're so
Yeah.
focused on the negative thing, and this is what's
Yeah.
driving people to want
Crazy.
something structural and rigid,
Yeah.
and it's like you don't necessarily have to resource to that, but
To that extreme. Yeah.
yeah, but I'm like, it's because you also have to think of all the good things that are happening, but it's because you're not exposing yourself to those good things because you're still in a bubble. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, the world sucks." I'm like, "Well, have you stepped out of your bubble to see all the other things that are going on?" Like, yes, like, shit's
2 things
happening.
can be true at once,
Yeah,
right?
but
Like,
there's
as
also people who are doctors that are saving lives every fucking day. There's
there's
nurses that are
people
going
that
to
are
work
being
every day.
born.
Yeah,
Mhm.
babies are being born. People are going to the arts, to the movies, enjoying their lives. There's people in the park,
There's people that are
having picnics and
laughing.
enjoying
Yeah.
friends' company. Like, there's a lot of good things happening, but you're just maybe too involved in your own stuff to really, like, look up
Yeah, and
and
touch
see what's
grass.
going on. Exactly. Just a little bit. This is something that I've had to also tell myself, like, you need to get out of your bubble. How do you expect things to change if you still do the same things every day? Like, you can be like, "Oh
Yeah.
my god, I'm so tired of doing this." Well, I'm like, "Okay, well, then switch it up." You're in your room all day working every single day, long
Mhm.
hours, and you're like, "I never
Yeah,
have time to go do things." I was like, "Okay, maybe log off of work, take a break, and come back later, and then or finish it tomorrow because work's always gonna be there." You know what I mean? It's like you kinda have to
right.
shift the way you think and the way that you're taking things in order to see a change. And if you think that religion is a part of that, great, but also don't let that be what rules your world because there's so much to see.
Like, I think it's just it's dangerous to sort of, like, um, give yourself up wholeheartedly because then you kinda lose your own agency in this because, for example, those bro folks that are kind of, pushing this rhetoric of being like, "You have to things are this way, things are this specific way, and it's rigid, and you're" and I think to your point of getting out, learning about new people, new cultures, and just seeing new things, because I feel like it's very easy for someone to kind of eat all of this up and be like, okay, I am this way, and this is how we are. This is how Catholics are, excuse me. And you kind of develop this idea of like identity, right? And how
Mhm.
you relate to others based on what they're not. How like, oh, you're not like a conforming person. You're not morally, like, and it's just like it's very rigid because it's not
Yeah.
just like you said, one or the other. There's more to that, and just because someone's not, for example, a Catholic, doesn't mean that they're a bad person. I've known a lot of people that are non-Catholics, and they're great people. I've known people that are atheists, and, they're
Or just
decent
because they
people.
go to church every weekend doesn't
And
make
I've
them a good person. You
and
know what
I've
I
known
mean?
a lot of shitty ass Catholics too. I've known some
Yeah,
people that
or
have done
just
some
people in
shitty
general, it's
fucking
like
things.
it's
Well, I've done
theology
shitty
for a
things.
reason,
Yeah.
it's the study of God, it's not something that is
It's not that
this is where
serious.
my
I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
this is where my atheist thing goes, I'm like, "Yes, it's a belief, right? It's something that you have belief in because,
Mhm.
again, it's a way to ground yourself and it's a way to give people hope. But it doesn't equate to you being a good person. It doesn't equate to other people being good people just because
Yeah.
they fall
Don't give it
under a
that weight
certain
too.
religious
Yeah.
branch, right? You kind of have to, and this is where life experience comes in. You can have faith and not believe in God. So
Mhm.
that's all I would say.
Yeah, no, I think my final thoughts are just a final question to you then. Like, do you think it's a good thing? Like, do you think this is a positive thing and that there's this resurgence of or Catholic revival?
Like I said, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing,
Mm.
but my concern more so, like I mentioned, is the the black and white lens that people who converted to Catholicism are seeing it as. I don't know how it is when you convert as an adult. I don't know what things you have to do. I don't know what
Mhm.
that process is. So maybe it's
Yeah.
because I don't know what that process is that I can necessarily be like, oh, it is a good thing or a bad thing. So I would more so want to know what the process is as an adult and how exactly you go about doing, your works of Catholicism. I think the issue is more so that people are like, I'm taking what I know from Christianity and following the Bible word for word and following the philosophy and the writings of these different saints. And I have a certain belief in my head, and these philosophies and writings support that. And
Validate
therefore,
it.
I'm
Yeah.
right. And
Mhm.
you guys are all wrong. And that's where I have an issue with it because yeah, I don't think politics and which is funny because the Vatican has always been political in my eyes. I
Yeah.
know they say
It
they
has
haven't, but
historically, yeah.
historically they have been. So there is a bias there. And I think this is when it comes to young men converting to Catholicism, there's a tie in with their obsession with the Roman Empire in there as well. And that whole
Mm.
ideology of like being a warrior. And it all kind of just
They're
meshes
like,
in.
we're this century's religious crusaders. We're just
Yeah,
shirtless and at the
exactly.
gym.
The Templar Knights, all of that stuff, like, I think a lot of that stuff has to do with that, and so that's why I'm just like, something's off." I don't know exactly what it is. I have an idea, um, but, that's why I would say I've been keeping a pulse on what's going on with
Mhm.
the Catholic Church,
Right.
annoyingly, but, again, there's a part of me that will always be like, "Yeah, I think being Catholic is great because of all these things that we said," right? So I think at the end of the day, it just falls on the person and what they
Mhm.
decide to do with it. So I can't necessarily say like, oh, like Catholicism is bad. I think I would just place it on who the person is and what they're showing. So it's like, well, I'm a
Yeah, let their
Catholic. I'm like,
actions
okay,
speak.
great. But
Let
what are
their
you doing,
actions
dude?
speak for
Yeah,
themselves, right?
exactly.
Because I mean, I feel like JD Vance converting to Catholicism in my book does not make him any more likable or relatable to me. If anything, it's more
Yeah.
sus. And like I said,
Yeah. That's, I was like,
what did I say
hmm.
earlier? It's because he's gay. Just kidding. Well,
We're going to say
like I said,
allegedly.
I think
'Cause we're
it's,
not trying to get
no, I mean, everybody knows. No, just kidding. It's a
everybody
known
know.
LOL. Lucy, it's a known fact. Okay? Get your facts straight. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think on my end, I think it could be a beautiful thing that people are resorting to Catholicism or even just religion in general to find a
Yeah.
sense of community and to find a sense of grounding. I think I've always been very big on you give power to the things that you believe in, but with that obviously comes great responsibility and like as always we always encourage people to be curious, to question things, especially when like why is everybody doing it now? Like why now? Like, and kind of sit on that and as always, we think that so long as like as we always say, your rights end where others begin. So don't try to fucking impose anything on anybody. And if you're using religion or any sort of scriptures or writing to weaponize it to justify violence and hurt towards others, especially your neighbor, then I call bullshit and you shouldn't be given the platform to do that. So
I mean,
yeah.
the only thing that I hope that comes out of this is that people will now be inspired aesthetically and art will be inspired because I mean, good things came out of the time
Yeah.
where people were,
Well, I'm just excited that people are into maximalism again because
yeah,
like
exactly. That's the only
ugh.
thing that I'm like, maybe something good will come out of
Minimalism
more
fucking
people
sucks. Yeah.
being Catholic and, the architecture of it, the art, I think in the 1400s when, the Vatican was at its peak, you had
Yeah, they
Leonardo da
invested a lot.
Vinci,
Yeah.
Botticelli, the Medicis, like, a lot of shit came out of that time, so let's just hope that artists are out there inspired and good stuff
Mhm.
will come out of it. That's what I'm putting out there. Good things will come. You know what? I will also say this. If you guys want community, start building third spaces
Mhm.
because clearly there's a need for it. And we also just need to get our minds together. What do those third spaces look like for people that want that sense of community? If it is church, great. But if it's something else that doesn't have to involve religion, I think that would also be a good thing, or if it just means you going to third spaces in general, like going to the arts, finding people who have, similar interests as you, like, expose
Mhm.
yourself to that. Like, I know sometimes it's a little pricey and money usually is the reason why a lot of people don't do
Yeah.
it, but I think you know what? I saw this, the parks. We need to start using the parks again because there's so many things that you could use the parks for.
Okay, and I'm speaking because I come from communities where, like, park used to be fun third spaces, but they're not. They're not
Mhm.
safe, so I can't go to my park and enjoy it and do a nice little walk and stuff. But, yeah, no, I agree that, like, parks could be a great avenue for that, so it'd be great if people either start using them no more to create safe spaces or that we have more government spending on these spaces so that they're accessible and they're also safer for the community.
But I think also, like, if more people started using them, they could become safe. You know what I mean? I think they are not safe because
Well,
people
that's what I'm
are
saying
scared
that
of
people
using them.
should go and
So
try to
then
create these
more
spaces.
you go and the more people go in numbers, I feel that they become a safe space. So I think that that's something that everybody kinda needs to, like, get together, whether it's doing, like, different activities or, going out and doing a little sip and wine or something, like, I think that that would be beneficial for
Well,
people.
we can't have open containers at parks. I'm just
Sorry,
kidding.
you're right. I don't know why I said sipping wine. Just sipping wine, like
No,
paint and
I
something,
like
you know?
I like that idea though. I think your head was in the right space. And
Sorry,
when you were
clearly I
ta
need alcohol.
when
It's
you
because 'cause I'm thinking of the Eucharist and then the blood of Christ and then third spaces, and I'm like, "Oh."
I I think you're spot on though in the sense of this call to action for people to go out there and if these spaces are limited to try to create them as best you can with the resources you have. I did recently see excuse me, someone on TikToks and obviously they had the means for it, but I just thought it was so beautiful that they host I think like bi-weekly it's like a working space, right? So it's like it's their own home where they host their friends and family that wanna come through that maybe work remote, and it's like a workspace that they offer them, right? And they have different areas, so, like, in their kitchen, they have, like, this little island where they have, like, pastries and they have a little coffee station, and the people that actually that go to these things too, they also bring things too, right? Like,
Mm,
they bring flowers or whatever it is, sort of like paying to them, not necessarily that they have to, but it is always appreciated. And then they have their living space where people can like kick it at the couch and like do their work. And they have different rooms within their house that like, okay, this is office space. This is like if you need to do like craft stuff because the people that go are there to work, but they're not all in corporate. Like some people are designers, are working on things, they're pitching
mhm.
ideas. And it was just so nice to see because this was an instance where you have people creating these third spaces, not just for themselves, but for their
Yeah,
immediate community. And it was just so beautiful. This is so cool. Like more, I wish more people did this and leaned into it. But also understand that that comes with a certain kind of privilege if you own your own space, if you have enough space but people can get inspired and do micro versions of that, right? Like if you and I
yeah.
still lived together, we could have hosted something like that, you know? And it probably would just be you and I because everybody else was far away. But like the idea is kind of cool. And
Mm,
maybe we just needed to make more friends.
I guess maybe this will be another potential topic we can talk about how digital media and then AI and just technology in general has made people or decreased creativity in a sense,
Yeah.
and how maybe
Well,
potentially the
sterilized it.
death
Yeah.
of third spaces has also affected the creatives, and how maybe opening up more third spaces and then people being attracted to this whole maximalism idea of faith inspires more art and more creativity, and then also just work in general, right? It's it's dampened creativity. That's what I wanted to say. So
Yeah.
maybe that could be a conversation for another day. But yeah,
Ex
guys, I mean, make those spaces if you guys have, and it doesn't require money. Like, I'm pretty sure it could be a community thing. Like, bring your own aisle, bring your own tools of whatever you want to create or whatever you guys want to do,
Yeah, and
and just get together and build community, and that's how it's done,
yeah.
right? You don't necessarily have to rely on a religion to do that.
Exactly. I do think that if anything, I think a good starting point would be to tap into your community networks to see. I know, like, for example, where I live, there's a lot of people hosting things and there's a lot of events. So just be tapped into that. And if there is a specific event that you'd like to host, but that you do not see already available, it's something that you can sort of pilot. And I think getting in touch with other people that are involved in the community and that organize things is huge because having those friendships or building those friendships is going to facilitate you when you want to host something because they can either put you in touch with the right people if there's any permits you have to get in place, and they could also promote your event and kind of encourage more community to
Mhm.
come and such. Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode.
We hope that you learned something new about Catholicism and the depths that goes to it and like everything else, it's nuanced. And we hope that if anything, it inspired you to be more curious about people around you, to try new things, and also to question things. Especially if you have questions, don't think that you're alone in it. Most often than not, other people are questioning the same thing.
Yeah,
So, if you wanna be vocal about it, you can, and you might find yourself around some like-minded people that
maybe
might
that'll be
even
your
challenge
third
your idea.
space. Let's read the Bible and question it. Maybe that should be our thing. Bible study, but like
You know what? Let's see,
anti.
this is our third space. Our podcast is our third space in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
We just need to have more people on here. No, I'm kidding,
Yeah.
but
We'll make a whole Zoom call.
right? Yeah, we have everyone just tap in.
All right, everyone. Have a great day and see you guys on the next episode. Que vayas con Dios.
Vayan con Dios. Y sobre todo, be like Walter,
En el nombre del Padre, el Hijo, el Espíritu Santo.
en nombre del
Mm.
papi, del junior, palomita buena onda. Amén.
All right, guys.
Vayan con
Bye.
Dios.